Now we're going to go over the Enuma Elish, the 7 tablets of creation. Now the Enuma Elish is actual real tablets that were discovered in Iraq. The Enuma Elish, the 7 tablets of creation. The Enuma Elish, also in Akkadian in cuneiform, is spelled Enuma Elish. It's a Babylonian creation myth. It was recovered by Austin Henry Layard in 1849 in the ruined library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh in Mosul, Iraq. It was published by George Smith in 1876. The Enuma Elish has 1,000 lines of recorded, 1,000 lines and is recorded in old script. Now, most of the tablet 5 has never been recovered until recently, which we're going to go over because it's really amazing that they just found tablet number 5 not too long ago, and it's actually in a museum in Iraq right now. So we had a big portion of that tablet missing, but now because of that, the story is even much more clear. The epic is one of the most important sources for understanding the Babylonian worldview, centered on the supremacy of Marduk. And we're going to talk about Marduk a little bit today. That's also known as Amun-Ra. For those of you who don't know, his other name is also Amun-Ra, a brutal ruler of ancient Egypt before it was even called Egypt. And the creation of humankind for the service of the gods. It's the primary original purpose, however, is not the exposition on theology or theology, but the elevation of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, above all other Mesopotamian gods. Amun-Ra, for example, Marduk, a lot of people don't know that he was the one who ushered in monotheism. Monotheism is the belief in a one world God, a one universal God, and not to worship any other gods. Matter of fact, in the Sumerian tablets, it says, you are not to worship any other God but me, which is the same thing it says in the Bible. Amun-Ra is the one who ordered everybody to say Amen or Amun-Ra at the end of every prayer, which then became shortened to Amen. So at the end of every prayer, whoever says Amen is actually giving thanks and homage to one of the most brutal rulers of all time. And that's what happens when, you don't research. The Enuma Elish exists in various copies from Babylonia and Assyria. The version from the library of Ashurbanipal dates back to the 7th century BCE. The composition of the text probably dates to the Bronze Age, to the time of Hammurabi, and perhaps earlier to the Kassite era, roughly 18th century to 16th century BCE. So we're talking about very old documents that predate the Bible by many, many, many thousands of years, okay? This is tablet number 5, which was recently found in Sulaymaniyah, I can never pronounce that right, Sulaymaniyah Museum in Iraq, tablet 5. This was just last year. Somebody stumbled across it at the actual museum. It was never even labeled. Nobody knew exactly what it was until a scholar said, hey, babe, I think this looks familiar. Could this be the missing tablet to the Enuma Elish? So now it's been well documented and it's found. So we have a more complete story. Now, there's a researcher out there that a lot of people know by the name of Zecharia Sitchin. He didn't translate these tablets, okay? And the reason why I say that, I respect Zecharia Sitchin's work. I believe that he's one of the greatest researchers in our modern day. I respect the effort that the guy put in. I love everything that he's done. I've read every single book that he's ever put out, and I've looked at every video he's ever been in. And I think that his work is just like all the other works of a lot of the other researchers and translators. It leaves a little room for your own perceptions. Now, what I found through reading probably 6 or 7 different books about the Anunnaki, and now translating the text myself, I come to find out that the underlying story, no matter who translates it, is always the same. People came here, they mined this earth resources, and at some point they decided to genetically participate in creating or manipulating an existing hominid on this planet. So no matter what source you get it from, it's all the same story with different nuances. Some people think, Nibiru, some people think Sirius, some people think Pleiades, some people think Orion. People say if they were so advanced, well, why were they writing on clay tablets? These stone tablets have lasted for thousands and thousands of years. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were leaving a record behind that we would find in the future, almost like a time capsule. Another thing that I like about stone, it's very hard to change the information around. Kind of like some of the more modern religious books have been altered in so many ways. Just with the modern Bible, over 8,000 incorrect translations just in that one book. Now multiply that over many, many books and many different publishers, and you start to find out a lot of information is backwards. Just to give you a small example, Moses did not cross the Sea of Reeds according to the original text of the Bible. He crossed the Sea of the Red Sea, he crossed the Sea of Reeds. So he didn't cross the Red Sea, he crossed the Sea of Reeds, which is another smaller sea, much closer and much easier to cross. You can go to the UCLA CDLI library online for free, grab a stone tablet off the virtual shelf, drop it into a translator, and read the tablet. Okay? So it's no more, oh, Zechariah Sitchin, oh, this one here or this one there. No. We can do it ourselves. It's up to us to find the information. It's up to us to dig and do the research. And all the tools have been made available to you in this day and age so that you can find out exactly what happened back then. Now, the Torah has been known as the law of God, which is actually what it translates to. A lot of the text in the Torah comes from Assyrian and Sumerian. A lot of the information in this book, in this scripture, originates from thousands and thousands of years prior. And so a lot of people say, well, you know, you're saying names like Marduk when I'm talking online and making posts and stuff, and you're talking about Enki and Enlil and all these Anunnaki people, but where's their name? Where does their name exist anywhere else? It's in the Torah. The Torah knows all about Enki, Enlil, Marduk, all these people, all these characters. They're all in these texts. But some of the texts are amazingly copied virtually almost word for word from the Sumerian tablets. The JewishVirtualLibrary.org. And in here, I just use the simple highlight tool to search for the word Marduk. I think they know who Marduk is. Marduk was the son of Enki, and that his rise to power ahead of time, because they always rose to power based on celestial movements. Marduk battled to rise to power ahead of time and became the one that rules in Pisces, which is when the Christian religion rose and monotheism rose, because he's the one who ushered in monotheism. He's the one who became the sun god and ordered Akhenaten to usher in monotheism. And another thing that a lot of people don't know, they've gotten it wrong, is a lot of the noses that have been knocked off of all the statues and so forth. It's not because white people didn't want black people to know that they were black. I just got to tell you like it is. It's because Akhenaten ordered it to be done. When I went to Egypt, not only did he order that, he ordered thousands upon thousands of glyphs, hieroglyphs of the ancient gods, Osiris and everybody else, to be defaced and removed, and a lot of them were even deleted. Many stories even deleted, which is why he was, you know, they proclaimed heresy against him and basically ran him out of there. Enuma Elish is a very interesting story. It really is a combination of two stories. One part is talking about the creation of the solar system, which sounds like a battle between people, but it's really a battle between planets. The Sumerians wrote this story based on their belief that the planets were sentient beings and even gave them names. Now, over millennia, as the story was retold and retold, the names changed a little bit to the victor being the god ruling at that time. And in this particular case, Marduk was Nibiru, the planet that crashed into Tiamat. Scientists now know that we are not from here, okay? We meaning our entire solar system. We are the aliens. As scientists announce that the sun, the moon, our planet, and its siblings were not born into the familiar band of stars known as the Milky Way galaxy, but we actually belong to a strange formation with an unfamiliar name of the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy. We are from another galaxy. Earth is really a spaceship. We have, not in the sense of a metallic object, but an actual biological object. We've traveled as two galaxies have merged. Using volumes of data from the 2-micron all-sky survey, a major project to survey the sky in infrared light led by the University of Massachusetts, the astronomers are answering questions that have baffled scientists for decades and proving that our own Milky Way is consuming one of its neighbors in a dramatic display of ongoing galactic cannibalism. The study, published in the Astrophysical Journal, is the first to map the full extent of the Sagittarius galaxy and show its vivid detail how its debris wraps around and passes through our Milky Way galaxy. Sagittarius is 10,000 times smaller in mass than the Milky Way, and so it's getting stretched out, torn apart, and gobbled up by the bigger Milky Way. So we are from the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy, and this type of thing happens all the time, believe it or not. Galaxies collide and form bigger and bigger galaxies. A lot of people don't know that. Our galaxy is relatively small compared to some of the galaxies out there. We are from another galaxy in the process of joining the Milky Way. We're still in the process. The merger hasn't even completed yet. So there's going to be a lot more rogue planets out there, a lot of potential other systems that may acquire an additional sun. There could be trinary star systems, quaternary star systems. The mystery why the Milky Way has always been sideways in the sky has never been answered until now. So now we know why the Milky Way is sideways in the sky. It's because we're merging with the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy. That one book led me into reading over 1,000 books, okay? Over 1,000 books. And I've posted my book list online many times. Even going into Sumerian tablets, you have to analyze the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Indian Vedas, in Sumerian tablets, the Bible, the Torah, the Quran. You have to analyze all of it. You can't just say, I'm going to read this one book and that's going to be history. That's everything that's everything that's happened. It doesn't work that way. But the Epic of Atrahasis is going to go over the Apsu, in the part where it's talking about the creation of our solar system. It's going to go over the Apsu, which you'll see in the video, the oldest of beings, the progenitor. Tiamat is what will become Earth. Mumu, which is the sun stewards of his house. Marduk is going to be obviously Nibiru, which we talked about before, or the planet of heaven, or in some cases now in modern times, Planet X. And Marduk is used here to represent a planet called Planet Heaven because he was given power by the leadership of the gods. So this text was no doubt named after him when he had rulership over Earth. These gods rule over celestial periods, and his reign is actually coming to an end. As we head into 2025, his reign actually officially comes to the end. Pisces actually officially comes to the end. Okay? Tiamat, which was a very large planet, about 4 to 6 times larger than Earth, was struck by an ancient Nibiru, and then it broke apart. Part of it became the asteroid belt, and the other part became Earth. And along with it, gravitationally, we pulled its moon, which we now have, which they call it Kingu, but it's our moon now. And that's basically the story of the Enuma Elish. Those words sound strikingly similar to what you have in the Old Testament of the Bible, separating the waters from the waters and so forth. It's all copied from this ancient tablet, or these ancient tablets. Now, this is an image from NASA depicting a brown dwarf star that they believe is orbiting our sun, which means that we live in a binary solar system. We don't have one sun in our solar system, we have two. This is very important to understand because the worldview and everything you've been taught since you were a little kid is that we have one sun and the planets go right around it and that's it. We have two suns. We live in a binary. I'm going to provide evidence and proof of that right now today. But this is a very interesting graphic that they've shown because it depicts the same ancient information about a rogue planet orbiting our sun every 3,600 years in a very elliptical orbit, which came from the Enuma Elish. NASA, 2 years ago, announced that they discovered Planet 9. Okay, it was actually NASA, it was actually Caltech working for NASA. These Caltech scientists discovered a planet. They discovered not only one planet, but multiple, orbiting in very elliptical orbits and very strange orbits inside of our solar system. The one particular that's about 4 to 6 times the size of the Earth, they labeled it Planet 9 because the Sumerians labeled it the 10th planet, but they wouldn't do that. But they labeled it Planet 9. Once you release information about everything that you know, you lose control and power. And this whole world system is designed on suppression of information and knowledge. The only thing keeping the human species completely enslaved, we're talking 7.5 billion people being ruled by less than 100 families. Think about that for a second. And how do they do this? Knowledge. The only separation between us and them is information. And suppression of that information keeps us enslaved. Mercury orbits counterclockwise on its axis. Okay? Counterclockwise on its axis. This is evidence of a rogue planet or a very large body coming through our solar system and disturbing, or what they call perturbing the orbits. If you look a little further down, you can see the Earth tilts on its orbit. That's the way it coalesced. But you look a little further back and you get to Uranus. It's on its side. And also, scientific data shows that Uranus and Neptune switched positions in the ancient past. The orbits, when you take the orbits all the way back, you rewind them with scientific data, you discover that they switched positions at some point. And something came through, as you saw in the Enuma Elish, if you were aware of that part when they talked about Uranus as Nibiru passed by, it moved it onto its side. and it's still on its side till this very day. So Uranus has a very strange orbit, orbit on its axis as it orbits the sun. The Dogon tribe have a very interesting story in that they originate from Egypt, which was actually Kem in ancient times, before it was called Egypt. The Dogons started there. For whatever reason, their tribe left out of Egypt and moved into Mali, Africa. They took the secret wisdom and sacred wisdom of this information that I'm going to show you now along with them and have passed it down for thousands and thousands of generations. And here we are now today with the Dogon tribe describing celestial information that we only discovered more recently in the 1970s. They believe that the Nomo Anunnaki came from a star system named Sirius. Not only just Sirius, but a dark star out there we call it Sirius B, which is actually a failed star or a star that ran out of fuel. It's a very small, dim light in the sky that can't be seen with the naked eye, and it wasn't even detected by astronomers until recently, which you'll see in a second. They also depict these creatures or these Anunnaki beings as being fish-like people or having fish suits on. And you see how they dress up in this garb and attire when they do their rituals to honor the Anunnaki, these Nomos. There's also in the top center, there's a Sumerian seal. That Sumerian seal depicts Enki and Enlil wearing fish suits. The importance of this is the fact that 450,000 years ago, the Anunnaki decided to come to this planet to mine for resources that they needed. And why would they do that? Well, we're doing the same thing. We now have a mission to go to an asteroid to mine it for resources. So why wouldn't a species more advanced than us do the same thing? For whatever reason that they needed them, we don't specifically know. Okay, some say it was gold, some say, but we have evidence that they mined all different types of resources, not just gold. The gold mines have been discovered in Africa, dating back a couple 100,000 years, which ironically is around the same exact time that Homo sapiens appeared on this planet, and the evidence has now been discovered. But the Sumerian kings list is before the flood. So what happened was before the flood, according to the Enuma Elish, the Anunnaki ruled this planet themselves. They worked themselves. They did all the mining themselves. They didn't have human beings here to work for them as slaves. They were doing the work. And they had this group of working class Anunnaki called Ijiji. That's exactly specifically the name given in the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Atrahasis. Well, they got tired of all this work. They were working, but they weren't supposed to be slaves. But if they would let up on the work, they would be punished. So what does that tell you? Slaves. So these people enslaved their own people and forced them, this working class, to do all this work. A lot of the work was done on Mars, and a lot of the work was done here on Earth. But Mars was very brutal for the Ijiji, and they were complaining that because of the thin atmosphere and because of lack of water and resources, and Mars was actually like a way station for them to relaunch back to their home planet with these resources, and no women, they were going to have a revolt. So they decided to revolt against Enki and Enlil. They came back to Earth in ships. I don't think they were boat ships on oceans. I think they were starships. They came here. They encircled Enki's property and Enlil's property. It was really Enlil's property because he was the one who had the above-ground abode, and threatened to go all-out war on a revolt. Now, if you're not being enslaved, why would you need to revolt against something? They were obviously being forced to do this labor for many shars, and the shar is 3,600 years, and they did it for hundreds of shars. So at that point, when Anu, who was Enki and Enlil's father, saw what was going on, he decided to find a way to come up with a solution because it didn't make any sense. It was going to slow down production and everything else. Enki says, well, there's an existing hominid on this planet that we can genetically modify, bringing them up by adding our essence to them and making them do the labor, bear the labor of the Ijiji. And this is exactly what they decided to do. Now, they had a couple of experiments in the beginning where they created these cloning chambers, which have also been discovered, these ancient type of chambers where the remnants of them are left behind in Africa and also in Iraq. But it failed because these people that they were creating, cloning from themselves, couldn't reproduce. And because of that, it was causing a problem. There wasn't enough relief of work. At one point, Enki's half-sister decided to take the genetic material, or an egg out of an existing hominid, and take the genetic material out, creating what they call a zygote in modern science, put Anunnaki genetics in, mixing with something they call clay, which I don't think was just dirt, and then injecting it into her womb, and she said she would take it to full term. And she took it to full term and gave birth to Adamu, the first Homo sapien, or what we would consider a modern human. And that's the real point in where we begin. That was about 250,000 years ago. And she was very excited. There's a famous cylinder seal of her holding it up. Prior to that, the Anunnaki ruled the earth. These kings ruled for that many, 241,000 years, just 8 kings. They ruled over themselves. There weren't any humans at the time until towards the end. And after the flood came, which the flood was pulled on by Enlil said, okay, I want to start fresh again. We need to start fresh. These humans now are reproducing too much. They're making too much noise. And I think we should just wipe it out and start fresh. And he was very brutal. He would put plagues out. He would just cull humans at will. Very evil person. He's the one actually named in a lot of ancient texts as Satan, or Satan. And Lil is Satan. Now, he twisted it on his brother Enki, because Enki was fell in love with humans, was the creator, but put a little bit too much juice in us. Gave us a little bit too much DNA, which science likes to call junk DNA, which is actually just disconnected upper level, high level genetics. But gave us a higher level of consciousness than he was told to give. He was also the one that was the father, most likely, of Atrahasis, which is Noah, and gave him information on how to avoid the flood, which, by the way, in the Atrahasis epic was only a 7-day advance notice. He didn't have years to build an ark, by the way, guys. The Atrahasis says it was only 7 days advance notice, and he gathered some local animals and some of his contents and so forth in his family, and they got on the boat, and they survived the flood, which pissed off Enlil even more. So after the flood is when they decided came to an agreement to allow human beings, half human, half Anunnaki beings, to be pharaohs and kings over human beings. So after the flood is when kingship was actually handed down to mankind. One of these cross points, you can find an anomaly on this planet. Okay, so globally, we have anomalies at every single point, including right off the coast of Florida in the Bermuda Triangle. We have found and discovered pyramids down there, still emitting some type of exotic energy. Now, if you take a hole right through the Earth directly to the other side of the planet from the Bermuda Triangle, you end up in the Devil's Triangle by Japan, right off the coast of Japan, where you have another famous, well-known, gigantic underwater pyramid there. Again, evidence that we have the same construction techniques being used by the same people all over the planet.